Welcome to a brand new series from the Mathaba Institute, in which we are going to be exploring the stories of the Prophets ﷺ from both the Qur'an and the Bible. The purpose of us making these videos is for the sake of our community getting greater clarity as to what these two scriptures entail. The stories that we want to begin with in this series is going to be the story of the birth of Yahya alayhi salatu wasalam, who is known as John the Baptist in the Bible. And that's going to be followed up with the story of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam's birth, who is biblically known as Jesus. The surah of choice for the study of these stories is going to be Surah Maryam in the Qur'an. And in the Bible, we're going to be studying the Gospel of Luke. But prior to getting into those stories, it's important for us to clarify some misconceptions that exist within our community. One of the prime misconceptions that is out there is that the Bible is the very Injīl that was revealed to Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. However, it was distorted and changed over time, and right now we don't have it in its original form. This is a very important misconception that we need to clarify, because in short, the Bible is not the Injīl that was revealed to Isa alayhi salatu wasalam at all. Rather, the Bible is a collection of religious texts that have been prepared by communities of authors over time, and it is divided into two sections. You have the Old Testament, which you can say in simple terms is the pre-Isa alayhi salatu wasalam era, and then you have the New Testament, which you would call the post-Isa alayhi salatu wasalam era. Now, when it comes to the Gospel of Luke that we want to study, I want to just go over the preface for us to get greater clarity as to why we are saying that the Bible is not the Injīl that was revealed upon Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. So if you look at the preface, which is going to be the English translation of the original Greek, because this was originally prepared in the Greek language, Luke assumingly writes, "Now many have undertaken to compile an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, like the accounts passed on to us by those who are eyewitnesses and servants of the word from the beginning. So it seemed good to me as well, because I have followed all things carefully from the beginning, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know for certain the things you were taught." So Luke, who we would know as Luke of Antioch, himself is writing here in the preface that he is going to be writing these accounts based on the information that has been passed on to him for a particular person that he is addressing as Theophilus. Theophilus is an honorary title that he is giving to the person that he is addressing, but the identity of this person is really unknown historically speaking. There are many different opinions as to who he may have been, but there's nothing that we can say with the utmost confirmation. So this in itself is demonstrating that this is not the revelation of Allah to Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. This is someone's writings that have come after Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. Now, it's important for us to get some insight as to who Luke of Antioch is. The Luke of Antioch is a person that was born either as a Jew or a non-Jew. There's really differences as to whether he was a Gentile or a Hellenistic Jew, but he does have Syrian heritage, because at that time, when it comes to Antioch, which today is Antakya in current day Turkey, that was part of Greater Syria in those days. So he is of Syrian heritage. He is known as a physician, because that's the way Paul, who arguably is the father of the Christian church, has identified him as. But there is great controversy as to whether Luke is really the author of this particular gospel. There are plenty of scholars that assert otherwise, that this was written later on. The exact dates as to when this gospel was prepared is really up for a lot of discussion, but you can narrow it down to the majority opinion of between 85 AD and 90 AD. There are some scholars currently that are asserting that it was actually written 155 AD. So the thing is that the true author of this gospel is really not known for certain. whether it truly is Luke of Antioch or whether it is someone else. That only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. So that's the first thing that we're going to understand. But if we were to go ahead and settle with the assertion that Luke is the true author of this gospel, the question is going to arise that who gave this information to Luke? Because he's simply saying that this was passed down, these are things that were related. So who exactly related this information to him? That is really not known for certain. But let's try and piece things together and see if we can establish a link to Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. Because when it comes to Luke of Antioch, he was not a disciple or who we would call a Sahabi of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. So Luke, he was a person that met Paul, the father of the church as we would say, right before Paul had the vision of the man from Macedonia who was begging him for help, and as a result Paul then made the journey to Macedonia to preach down there. So Luke met Paul prior to this event. Now it is historically confirmed that Paul had accompanied, or I should say Luke had accompanied Paul in his final journey to Jerusalem. But when it comes to Paul, did Paul really relate this information to Luke or not? We don't know for certain. But let's assume that he did, that Luke got this information from Paul, the father of the church. Paul, when it comes to him, where did he get this information from that Luke is assumingly going to be writing in his gospel? Well, when it comes to Paul, Paul actually is also not a disciple of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. Rather, he embraced the faith of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam 4 to 7 years after the crucifixion, according to various accounts. So prior to that, he was actually persecuting the followers of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. But then he came under the influence of Barnabas. Barnabas is an individual who had taken Paul to Antioch for a year, and as a result, Paul under his influence had converted to the faith of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. And right now, when it comes to the New Testament, which I said is the post Isa alayhi salatu wasalam scriptures, out of the 27 books that are in there, 13 are attributed to Paul, but out of those 13, only 7 can be authentically attributed to Paul. So the very fact that it's being attributed to Paul also solidifies the assertion that this is not the revelation of Allah to Isa alayhi salatu wasalam that we know as the Injīl. Now, Barnabas, whose name I took earlier on, his original name is Joseph, according to one account, and he is the disciple of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, according to many accounts. He accompanied Isa alayhi salatu wasalam in his journeys to Galilee, and maybe he had gotten this information directly from Isa alayhi salatu wasalam and related it to Paul, who related it to Luke, who then penned this down. But again, none of this information is for certain. This is just an outsider like me trying to see if we can establish a link between Luke and Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. But at the end, what we wanted to establish is that the New Testament and the Old Testament combined, that we know as the Bible, is not the Injīl that was revealed to Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. Rather, from an Islamic perspective, when it comes to the different level of texts, we would classify this as a historical text that is being related from historians like Ibn Ishaq rahimahullah, who has related many stories of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So we'd keep it as a historical text. It would not fall at the level of hadith, where we have clear chains and scrutiny has been exercised, and there's going to be this effort for confirming whether the Prophet ﷺ did this or said this or had consented to this. There's a whole process behind this, and the Bible cannot fall in that realm, and it definitely does not come anywhere close to the revelation of Allah known as the Qur'an. So this is something I needed to clarify before we embark on the stories of both Yahya alayhi salatu wasalam and Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. But before again going to those stories, there's another question that we need to address. Is it possible that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam copied these stories from the Bible and then put his spin on it and presented them as the Qur'an? because this is an accusation that is made by certain people in the community who are not really friends of the Muslim community. Let's put it like that, mildly said. This is something that we definitely want to explore, and we will in our next video. So until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.